Hi, hello, welcome to the Jet Show. Hi, hello, welcome to the Jet Show. You know what day it is. If you read the title, then you already know what this is. It's True Crime Thursday, True Crime Thursday. In today's True Crime Thursday story, I'm gonna tell you about the slaughter at the supermarket. Buckle up, babies, you're in for a ride. So, Aranyarouch is born in Bangkok, Thailand. Her mom left when she was 4 years old. She was left to be raised by her grandmother. Her dad was an absentee and he was a drunk. So they grew up poor. She was depressed. She was picked on as a kid. She felt like a burden to her family and her grandma. So she moved to America when she was 23 years old. She started a job at a warehouse where she met her future husband, Tom Roche. They met when she was 30 and they got married 4 years later. Her friends and family would go on to say that she was very loving and very compassionate and very friendly. She loved to cook and clean, and she was a dedicated wife and a very hard worker. Hard work would be noticed while she worked at a local grocery store, and she became a seafood manager. They would say that she was a perfectionist, and sometimes she could be very off-putting with her comments.
She is vicious.
So it offended a lot of people, but they knew that she was dedicated to the job. They said she was very precise, she followed all the rules. They loved her so much, and they knew what a great worker she was. Her hours were supposed to be 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. But they would have her come back at 9 o'clock at night to 11 p.m. to close the seafood department. They would have her clean in the glass, put up the food, and she loved it. She loved it. She worked very, very hard. She worked so hard that she was promoted to seafood specialist. So being a seafood specialist, she was afforded the opportunity to buy a BMW. Everything seems perfect, doesn't it? Well, not as all as what it may seem. She had a co-worker named Greg Janowski, and he was a jokester. He really loved to pick on her, and it would really get under her skin. And Aranya, she's very earnest, so she's an easy target for bullying. Greg would pick on Aranya because she drove a BMW. He would make comments like, quote,
"How can you afford a BMW working here?"
end quote. Aranya didn't really take his jokes. They would really get under her skin. Mom would complain to her husband, Tom. And Tom would say, "Why don't you go and speak to a manager?" She spoke to the manager, her manager, and they just, they didn't take it very seriously at all. And her husband, Tom, suggested, "Why don't you go above your manager's head?" Aranya would say that it would be in her culture, it would, quote, be disrespectful to go over her manager's head. So Tom, her husband, decided he's going to confront Greg Janowski. Well, when he confronted Greg just walked away and laughed. Greg would go on later to keep picking on Aranya and say, "Oh, well, your husband is coming up here to defend you now." Greg would make fun of her culture, making very insensitive comments. When she couldn't reach the top shelf at work, "Would you help me reach this on the shelf?" He says, quote,
"Why don't you use your jiu-jitsu moves to get it down?"
end quote. This just infuriates Aranya. She just holds it in and she says, "Stop picking on me." And he just laughs. He kept picking on her. He would tell her, "Why don't you crawl into your hole? Why don't you go back to Thailand?" Aranya really couldn't take the criticism. She just did not know what to do. Aranya one day decided she wanted to take target lessons. Well, her husband, I believe, this was back when MySpace was a thing. He took a picture of Aranya taking target lessons, shooting the gun. He put under the caption, "Don't mess with this Thai girl." And they didn't really use the gun. She put the gun in the bottom drawer of her nightstand. So the teasing from Greg went on for months. He made fun of her haircut, made comments like, "I can't believe you're married. You look like a boy." Because Aranya had a very short haircut. The taunting from Greg continued to go on and on. She became deeply depressed. She would come home, she would shut down, she would sleep all day, she quit cooking and cleaning. Her normal happy demeanor was diminishing. She's normally always happy to go to work, to see her customers, the customers and her other coworkers that didn't pick on her would rave on how wonderful she was. And her husband is deeply concerned, so because he knows about Aranya's past history, because through depression and PTSD, and she attempted suicide by rope, but obviously she was unsuccessful. Aranya was raised as a Buddhist, but when she met her husband Tom, he introduced her to Christianity. He would take her to church hoping that this would help her. And Tom noticed how his wife had changed so much, and he was deeply concerned. Well, it just so happens that Tom works for the same grocery store chain, but at a different location. He speaks with his manager about having his wife come over to work at the store where he works. His manager is very ecstatic and says, yes, she definitely can come over here. But she had to wait a while before she was able to go and work at the store her husband was. So things were starting to look up for Aranya. Her and her husband had planned a cruise in the upcoming months. They were planning on retiring in a few years and moving to Thailand and opening a convenience store. Meanwhile, the taunting and the bullying by Greg continued. Aranya, as I mentioned earlier, was a very hard worker. So Aranya was a hard worker. She would come in and work off of the clock. She would come in early, begin her shift, and then clock in. Well, Greg noticed it and he confronted her. He says, you know you're not supposed to work off the clock. Aranya responds, quote,
if you mess with my job, I'll kill you,
end quote. Well, Greg reports her for working off of the clock. Aranya refuses to sign the write-up. So she goes home, she's still upset. But before she leaves work, she scratches Greg's name off of the upcoming schedule at work. Well, another coworker noticed this and told Greg. Greg then told their manager. Well, meanwhile, Aranya was at home. She was off the next 2 days. So she's back, her happy self. She's cooking and cleaning, knowing that she has a bright future ahead and she will not have to deal with Greg's bullying anymore. The next day that she was supposed to go back to work, she was ecstatic to speak to her manager. It just so happens that her manager wanted to speak to her too. So when they sit her down in the office, she's very happy, she's smiling, she's very energetic, and they tell her, well, we have to let you go since you threatened to kill one of your coworkers. Aranya is so upset. She's stuttering, she's speechless, she's crying, she's pleading for her job. I can't be fired. Oh my gosh, I cannot be fired. I can't believe this is happening. She's so upset. They tell her that they apologize to her and tell her that they really didn't want to fire her, but they knew that her threatening to kill somebody is illegal. And Aranya goes home and she feels horrible. Because in her culture, to be fired is a disgrace. Her mind is she just feels like a horrible person. So Aranya, she goes home, she lays down for a while. Meanwhile, Greg Janowski, he's on his way to work. He always would get to work an hour early. He would sit in the car, smoke a cigarette, talk to his wife, and talk to his daughter. When Greg was on the phone with his wife, Aranya comes and shoots him in the head 4 times. After she shoots Greg in the head 4 times, she heads into the grocery store. She goes to look for her boss's boss. He's one of the managers that fired her. It just so happens that he was on a business lunch away from the store. She heads over to the seafood department where her boss is, but as she pulls the gun out of her green bag, the bullet ejects, so she's unsuccessful at shooting him. And once the gun ejected, like any other normal person, he took off running, getting everyone out of the store. Aranya continues to walk around the store with the gun in her green bag. She just happens to run into one of her coworkers. Her coworker has no idea what she's just done. She notices that Aranya is acting very strange, and then she notices that Aranya has a gun in her bag. Her friend tries to take the gun away from her, but she's unsuccessful, and Aranya pushes her away, and she keeps walking through the store. Then by that time, police had been called, and they were already in the store, and Aranya shoots one officer. I couldn't find out his condition or if he survived or not, but another officer, he fired at her through between the aisle, and he missed, and then Aranya shoots at him, and then he ends up shooting her 4 times. By this time, her husband arrives at the store. He's unaware of what his wife Aranya has done. He's thinking that someone shot her. He didn't know that she was the shooter. When he arrives at the store, the officers go to arrest him because they think that he is out to finish what she started, when in reality he had no idea what was going on. He sees them take his wife away in the ambulance to the hospital, and Aranya is in a coma. The doctors tell Tom and her family that you should just prepare her funeral arrangements because she's not gonna make it. Well, Aranya did make it, and she had her trial in June of 2012. At the trial, more evidence of Aranya unraveling came to light. After she was fired, her manager told prosecutors that she said, quote,
"After I kill Greg Janowski, I'll be dead and I'll be crying for my family."
End quote. So the question is, why didn't the manager or anyone call the police, or why didn't anyone warn Greg of what Aranya said? Why? Maybe this could have been prevented. Aranya pleads insanity, but the prosecutors say that she couldn't have been insane. There's 30 cameras in the store in the broad daylight, and she's still walking around. Well, Aranya was found guilty. She was charged with 2 life sentences for premeditated murder and first-degree murder. I don't know how I feel about this case, because I'm not excusing Aranya and her murdering Greg Janowski, but also at the same time, can you push somebody to their breaking point? How many times can you poke the bear? Like, you eventually are gonna stand up to a bully. And no, I don't agree with how she handled the bullying. This definitely wasn't the answer either, but what was she supposed to do? Well, of course she should have went over her manager's head. But did she really know any better? Did she snap? Well, obviously she snapped. Maybe they should have given her a mental evaluation. And also, the store was also sued because this could have been preventable, and this was also predictable. You've heard so many stories about a coworker or someone being fired, coming back, and they just snap and they come back and either kill or hurt someone at the job. You've heard this several times before. So why didn't they prevent this? Why didn't they call the cops? Why didn't they warn Greg? Why didn't someone give her help? I don't know how I feel about this. I feel like they should have given her, like, maybe a mental evaluation or put her in a mental hospital. I'm not sure, but she did murder someone. So let me know what you guys think about this story. I don't know, I'm kind of torn about this because bullying is not okay, and murder is definitely not okay either. Thank you guys so much for watching today's True Crime Thursday. Let me know what other videos you would like to see, and let me know if you like these videos, and let me know if you like the way that I'm telling the story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in next week's True Crime Thursday. Bye.